guys, it's Nova. First off, before we jump into things, this picture is a sort of a companion piece to the last one I did and the one before. I'm doing kind of a series of character busts, I guess, pictures of some of my characters for the newest project that I'm working on. This character is from the same one as the last two. There's actually another one up on my DeviantArt that I think is really cute too, of another character. This is actually the twin of the last one I posted. He's a lot more shy and reserved, and eventually I'm going to do video character summaries on each of these characters. But I wanted to let you guys know that before I get into the next thing. Also, there might be some more content coming up that's going to be, at least between here and in October, essentially me doing con prep stuff, because I have officially gotten into my first artist alley that I've ever gotten a chance to do. And it's going to be in October, and I am really excited about it, and I've been giddy all day about it, actually, since I got the letter. I have so much work to do. But I'm excited, and terrified, and excited, and I don't know how to handle myself. So I wanted to let you guys know that, because that should lead into some pretty good content, I think, because I get to play around with con prep and doing designs and things like that, and I think that'll be a lot of fun. Because I've covered that and talked about what the picture is for this video, let's get into the story. So I've already done one on my absolute worst teacher. I've done a video on my absolute worst teacher. I will at least put it in the description. It was about my worst teacher ever. She was my 4th grade teacher. I hated her. She was horrible, especially for a kid who's very creative and artistic. I will say, though, she was not my only bad teacher. And in this, we are not going to be covering all of my bad teachers either. There are other ones. I will say, this one's going to cover 2 in particular, but I think with talking about them, that's going to take up quite enough time that I'm going to need to split this into 2 parts, because I don't want to post like an hour-long video. Okay, I do want to touch on the fact that with this, some of these teachers floored me. I had some really bad teachers and people who really shouldn't have been teachers. Going into this first story, we had one teacher in particular who was one of those who was a teacher so he could be the football coach. This was my 9th grade math teacher, my Algebra 1 teacher. And let me touch on the fact that I am pretty daggone good at math. I have always been good at math. Math has always been one of my best subjects, okay? My absolute best subject. So, I've never had a bad time in a math class like this. This one was horrible. First off, I swear he only taught so that he could be the football coach. And of course, I had him during football season. I had him in the fall during football season. This was the only math class that I ever absolutely failed and had to retake, because that's how bad this guy was. First off, he was not at all receptive to if you needed, like, extra help. If you needed extra help, he just was not at all really wanting to help you, because he really wasn't wanting to be there to teach. And it was so frustrating, because one of the few things that I do have difficulty with, to this day actually, one of the very few things that I have a lot of trouble with in math, and it's one of the only things, give me an algebra problem, I can do that all day long. Give me anything else, I can do any of that. But give me graphing, and suddenly it's like all of my knowledge of math kind of just runs away. And I still don't get it to this day completely. I bet if I had somebody really properly teach me and help me understand, I could get it. I really don't know how I ever got past that one. But the fact that if I asked for help, I didn't get it was such a problem. But like I said, this was the only thing in math that I was really bad at. Give me algebra, I'm fine. Give me geometry, I'm fine. But graphing was just an untamable beast as far as I was concerned. And I tried to get help. I tried so hard to get help. And I couldn't. He wouldn't. It was frustrating. And on top of that, because it was hard but not like enjoyable challenge hard, I like. Because then I didn't get bored in the class. But this one, and my grades always dip at some point in the year, but it was always in the second semester. It was always in the second semester whenever things really were starting to wind down, getting towards, test prep and all that, when it got really boring. That was where I struggled. In fall, I didn't have that issue. So the fact that I was having an issue with my grades in my best subject, that should have been some kind of a warning sign to somebody, but apparently not. And I will say that this was not the only problem with this teacher either. He was honestly, he was pretty arrogant. I didn't care much for him because he didn't seem to want anything to do with the students unless it was one of the sports kids. Now, he would help the sports kids. He would help the sports kids to make sure that they had the grades they needed to so that, they could be at the football games. But I wasn't a sports kid, so, forget me, even though I'm actively wanting to learn and wanting help. It was a running problem. But another reason why I did not like this teacher was, we had a few kids, just like in the current generation of kids, who have some crazy names, because there are some people who just should not be given the power to name a child because of some of the crazy names that come up. We had those in my generation as well. This is not a new phenomenon. It just happens to be noticed more because people are posting their wonderful ideas on social media. That's the difference. That's where the difference comes in. That's it. You have kids that, even taking out the whole thing of if somebody was trans or not, given the fact that where I grew up, that wasn't really something that came into play, because I guarantee you, actually I know for a fact, because I was friends with somebody who ended up coming out completely as trans. I was friends with someone in my grade, but that kind of thing never really came up in my school, just because of, middle of the Bible Belt. For anybody outside the US, I know most of the people who watch my stuff, at least according to my analytics, are in the US. The Bible Belt is a more southern area and is it's more southern, but it's still around the middle area, at least of the eastern coast especially, where there's so much focus on traditionalism and, Christianity and stuff like that. I will not get into that today, because no thank you. But it led to, especially in my generation, even though we were getting more aware of things, it led to a lot of people, hiding their identity and things like that. That's like, I'm non-binary, I lean masculine. That I did not even dream of bringing that up to anybody until I was out of high school. And even then, I didn't end up bringing it up to anybody except for my girlfriend for a very long time. Very long time. And it's much better now, but it's still rough. But back then, taking trans people out of the equation, sometimes kids just don't like their name. Sometimes kids don't like their name, they want to go by a different name. And that was the case with a few of ours. We had one boy whose name, I know I've heard before of, guys named Tracy or Ashley or things like that. But this guy had a very much more quote-unquote feminine name. A very feminine one, especially for our area. He preferred not to go by that, and he wanted to go by another name. Teacher wouldn't. He wouldn't. If it wasn't a nickname, he asked us too, if we had any nicknames that we wanted to go by instead, if we had a name that we wanted to go by instead of what was on the roster. But it wasn't until, this kid and another one who, he didn't like his name because it was I'm gonna say, what name am I gonna go with? I'm gonna go with Melvin, because most people don't think about that. But there was a kid who had a name that was kind of out there for our generation, which was Melvin. And he hated his name. He hated his name. He wanted to go by something else. And in both cases, it was not something outlandish. It was not something strange. But the answer was no, unless the nickname that a kid wanted to go by was directly related to and a shortened form of their actual name. Which, why bother? If you're going to do that, and then go, no, I'm just gonna call you by your actual name anyway, even though you've told me that you don't like that because I'm the teacher and I said so. Why bother asking for what a kid prefers to go by? Why? I think it's stupid. I think it's rude. I think honestly, it's mean. It sets people up to be picked on too, especially if a kid is one who is picked on already. I requested a nickname. Mine was a little bit mine wasn't out there, but it was one of those where I just didn't want to go by my name, especially because this was my first year in high school. There were more kids than were just in my middle school, and definitely more than there were in my elementary school. And when a kid goes into high school, a lot of times they want to reinvent themselves. And I really wanted to, because when I was younger, I was picked on because I was the weird kid, but we're going to get into that another time. So I asked for one, and he was just like, no, we're not going to do that. You're not going to get a nickname unless it's a shortened version of your normal name. And that was when we found out that rule. And that was why with the others, he absolutely refused to use their nicknames and their preferred names. I just could not stand this teacher, and like I said, on top just being rude to the students, he was one of these who would kind of mock you if you got called up to the board. And if he was taking, volunteers to go up to the board, honestly, and we didn't figure this out until like halfway through the semester, the best way to not end up having to go up to the board was to raise your hand, because if you raised your hand, he wasn't gonna pick you, because he was gonna pick one of the kids who didn't raise their hands, because he wanted to catch them out for either not paying attention or stuff like that. And it was usually somebody who wasn't not paying attention, it was somebody who didn't understand the material because he was a bad teacher. So he'd just end up calling them out and essentially embarrassing them in front of the whole class. And that happened to me a couple of times, and it was very upsetting, because I feel like that's kind of not a good way for teachers to do anyway. Just the whole thing of, you got kids who are clearly volunteering, they clearly know the answer, and at least in my case, if my hand's not up, I don't know the answer, or I'm having a very bad time and I don't want to have attention drawn to me, or something like that. And I couldn't stand teachers who singled out the kids who did not raise their hands. Even if they raised their hands every other time, you weren't going to get called on unless it was the one time you didn't raise your hand. So it's the one time that you very obviously didn't know the answer, and that was when he'd pick you. And it was frustrating because he wouldn't use it as an opportunity to teach. He would use it as an opportunity to mock. But overall, I ended up, and I'm not mistaken, that teacher is still teaching. But overall, with that particular teacher, other than causing me to fail the only math class I've ever failed, there wasn't much else to say about him beyond that, except for the fact, and I will never not be angry about this. There's a particular scholarship in my state that requires not only a certain overall GPA and certain test scores and all of that, but you have to have a specific overall GPA in each of your high school core subjects. So English, history / social studies, I got tongue-tied, science, and math. Because of this teacher, and I will never not be angry about this, this may just end up being a story about this teacher. I might tack the second one on there just because the second one's really short, it just annoyed me. But with this one in particular, it made me so mad, because of that teacher and how badly I failed his class when I had it, my GPA for that overall math GPA was dragged down to the point where I missed that scholarship, which at the time, nowadays it only covers up to a certain amount. Back then, I say back then, but back then, okay. Considering when I graduated, I don't feel as old as I am sometimes. But when I graduated, that particular scholarship would essentially cover your full 4-year ride at a school. We're talking, if you went to live on campus, they covered board, tuition, everything. And I missed it by less than half a point. And not less than half a point in my overall GPA. It was only less than half a point in my math GPA. And I will never not be angry about that. Because, it was actually so much of a throw that the people from the scholarship program actually called me to find out what happened. Now, they from what they told me, they weren't able to do anything about it, which made me mad. I was very upset at that. I will forever, my whole life, be angry about that. But they were so stunned that they called me to find out what happened. Because my testing scores were fine, all my other GPAs were fine, and my testing scores in math were fine. It was just that kept me from getting that scholarship, and I was so angry. I was so upset and so angry, and I'm still so upset and still so angry, but I'm trying to just chill But I don't think I can ever forgive that teacher for that, because it was very upsetting. I don't think I can ever forgive that teacher for that. Okay, I've still got a couple more minutes. Let's cover a really short one real quick, because I think that's about it for the awful, horrible math teacher. But I will say, this one was an 8th grade teacher, so it was the year before, and this teacher just frustrated me, because I would get really aggravated at teachers who acted like just because I was a certain age, they don't believe that I actually know a word that I know. That was how they were. I had some that were like that, despite the fact that it was a very common occurrence that I would be in class reading a book, like in the middle of class. And even better, when this happened, considering the word that the teacher didn't believe me on, we were reading Edgar Allan Poe. I think it was The Telltale Heart. And I know that in my little essay question on the test, now keep in mind, I definitely couldn't have cheated because I was right by the teacher's desk for the test. And I used the word, we were talking about The Telltale Heart, I used the word grotesque. This teacher took points off. And I was too shy to actually confront her about it, so I didn't say anything, but I should have gotten a higher score on that test than I did. But in the essay question, I used the word grotesque, and for some reason, she thought I was lying about knowing it. She thought I had cheated somehow to know the word grotesque. I didn't cheat. I just happened to read a lot of mystery novels, and read a lot of books, and listen to a lot of things. And I also watched crime dramas and stuff with my grandmother. The word grotesque was not a hard word for me, but this teacher actually took points off of my English paper. Well, it wasn't an English paper, but my English test, because in that essay question, I used the word grotesque, talking about The Telltale Heart, which as an adult, I don't find it grotesque or anything like that. But as a kid, I did, because of the somewhat gruesome way that things were, like, the mental image that it painted for me as a kid. I found it a bit gruesome. As an adult, I don't, which, as an adult, and as a kid, I really enjoy horror movies and spooky stuff, and gore never bothered me or anything like that. That was another thing. I also, by the time I was in 8th grade, I was watching horror movies. I knew what grotesque meant. And it just floored me. It absolutely floored me that teacher did that. But like I said, I say shy. I should say I had too much anxiety to say anything, because I did not say anything. I dealt with a few points off. I still had a good grade, but I was mad because I could have had a better grade. One reason I find that so frustrating and funny is because I have a nephew. He's really young. He's I think he's very early on in school. But he'll pull out words that you would not guess that someone that his age would know. But I know that he does in fact know them, because he uses them correctly. When he busted out impressive at one point, when he was honestly too young to really know what impressive meant, and I'm like, oh, okay. And he used it right. I was like, alright, good job. So is your word usage. I think he used impulsive a couple of weeks ago in the correct context. And I'm like, where do you learn half of these words? But he uses them correctly and without any outside prompting. So I know he actually knows them. It just, I worry that he's gonna get, done the same way over stuff like that I was, and it's frustrating. But it makes me think that people don't realize just how smart kids are. They don't at all realize how smart kids are. But yeah, that was the awful math teacher that I had, and the ridiculous English teacher who apparently thought that big words were outside the realm of kids' potential vocabulary, depending on what the word was. Like, some kids don't just read. Like I said, I think with recording, I'm at the 25-minute mark or so. These definitely aren't all my bad teachers. I think we're getting close to the halfway mark of my bad teacher stories. But I didn't expect the first one to go on for so long, so I'm gonna end it here. I will have to do another video about my bad teachers and how awful they were, but that's definitely enough for now. So, if you want to hear about the awful 4th grade teacher who made me tear up my own art, I'm gonna link that down in the description. have you guys ever had any awful teachers? Let me know, because I know that other people have, but it's always nice to know you're not alone. No matter how old you get, something like that, it's nice to know that you weren't the only kid who was treated like that by teachers, or had some really awful teachers. So if you guys have any of your own stories, feel free to share them down below. Hopefully, I will get my next video up soon. This one was supposed to be up a couple days ago. I say hopefully, I intend to get the next one up it should go up the normal time. With the way things look like they're going to go this week, it should go up at the normal time. But expect some con prep videos in the future going forward, and I will see you guys next time.